Most people spend their entire lives trying to seek the kingdom, without realizing they've been looking in the wrong direction. When people hear the word kingdom, the mind immediately creates an image of a place somewhere above the clouds, somewhere far away, somewhere we might reach one day if we are good enough. This misunderstanding has shaped generations of spiritual seeking. People wait for the kingdom as though it were a destination, a reward at the end of life, or a future reality separate from the present moment. But the original meaning points in an entirely different direction. The kingdom was never meant to be imagined geographically. It is not a location in space, time, or the afterlife. It is a way of seeing, a quality of awareness, a condition of consciousness in which God is recognized as present reality. When the kingdom is understood as consciousness, everything shifts. Consciousness is not something you travel to, it is something you awaken within. You do not move toward it, because it is already where you are. You simply stop being unaware of it. This is why the kingdom cannot be found through physical movement, religious effort, or external achievement. No amount of searching outward can reveal what is only perceived inwardly. The kingdom is not entered by crossing borders or meeting conditions, but by a change in perception, a quiet inner recognition of divine presence as the substance of life itself. This explains why so many sincere seekers feel frustrated. They are looking for God where God is not meant to be found. They expect signs, events, emotions, or external proof, while the kingdom reveals itself as a subtle inner knowing. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not come with spectacle. It is revealed the moment the mind relaxes its grip on fear, control, and constant thinking, and allows awareness to rest in stillness. In that stillness, the sense of separation dissolves, and what remains is a quiet certainty of being held, guided, and sustained. When the kingdom is seen as consciousness, prayer also changes. Prayer is no longer an attempt to reach a distant God. It becomes communion and awareness of unity rather than a request for intervention. There is no need to convince, persuade, or plead, because the presence being acknowledged is already functioning as the life within you. The kingdom is not something God gives you, it is something God reveals as you when the illusion of separation fades. This understanding removes spiritual striving. You are no longer trying to become spiritual, earn favor, or qualify for divine attention. The kingdom does not respond to effort, it responds to awareness. It is revealed not through doing more, but through realizing more deeply. This is why children, the simple-hearted, and the inwardly quiet often sense it more naturally than the intellectually religious. They are less occupied with concepts and more open to presence. To say the kingdom is not a place is to say it is immediate. It is here before thought labels it, before fear distorts it, before the mind searches for it elsewhere. It exists as the underlying reality of every moment, whether recognized or not. And the moment it is recognized, life begins to be lived from a different center, less from struggle, more from trust, less from fear, more from an inner assurance that does not depend on circumstances, conditions, or outcomes. Most people assume that seeking God means doing something more prayer, more discipline, more effort, more spiritual activity. Seeking is often understood as a kind of spiritual striving, as though the divine were distant and could only be reached through persistent effort. This assumption quietly turns spirituality into work and transforms faith into a task, yet the deeper meaning of seeking points in the opposite direction. It is not an outward pursuit but an inward awakening. It is not about effort but about awareness. Seeking, in its truest sense, is the willingness to turn attention away from appearances and toward the inner reality that is already present. Outer effort operates through the mind's habit of control. The mind believes that if it thinks enough, plans enough, or tries hard enough, it can reach God. But God is not an object that can be grasped by thought, nor a goal that can be achieved by willpower. The more the mind strains, the more it reinforces the illusion of separation. True seeking begins when the mind becomes quiet enough to stop searching outward and begins to listen inward. This listening is not passive in a lazy sense, but receptive in a deeply attentive sense. It is an alert stillness rather than a mental effort. Inner awareness does not ask the question, "How do I reach God?" It asks, "What is already here that I have not been noticing?" This subtle shift changes everything. Instead of projecting fulfillment into the future, awareness settles into the present. Instead of demanding results, it allows revelation. Instead of trying to produce spiritual experience, it opens to the recognition of spiritual reality. In this way, seeking becomes less about movement and more about orientation. The heart turns inward, not to escape the world, but to perceive the divine presence functioning within it. This is why seeking is often described as waiting, watching, or being still. These are not instructions to do nothing, they are invitations to stop interfering. Constant mental effort clouds perception. Fear-based seeking keeps the soul restless. Inner awareness, however, allows the surface agitation of thought to settle, revealing what has always been beneath it. Just as muddy water clears when left undisturbed, consciousness becomes transparent when striving ceases. In that transparency, the sense of divine nearness emerges naturally, without force or effort. Many become discouraged because they seek with expectation. They want proof, feelings, or visible outcomes. But inner awareness does not operate on demand. It unfolds quietly, often unnoticed at first. It shows itself as a subtle peace, a gentle confidence, a sense of being guided without knowing how. These are not emotional highs, they are signs of alignment. When awareness replaces effort, life begins to flow rather than resist. Decisions become simpler. Anxiety loosens its grip. Trust arises not because problems disappear, but because the center from which life is lived has shifted. To seek inwardly is not to withdraw from life, but to engage it from a deeper source. Action still happens, responsibilities remain, and challenges continue, but they are met from a place of inner stability rather than mental struggle. Seeking, then, is not a journey toward God, but a turning toward what has been present all along. It is the recognition that the divine is not found through effortful searching, but through a quiet attentiveness that allows truth to reveal itself within ordinary moments. Many people live with the idea that spiritual fulfillment belongs to the future. They believe that the kingdom of God will be revealed later, after more growth, more purification, more suffering, or even after death. This belief quietly postpones peace and places divine reality just beyond reach. It turns spirituality into a waiting room where life is endured rather than lived. Yet the deeper understanding reveals something entirely different. The kingdom is not delayed, withheld, or scheduled for another time. It is present now, but it is present in a way that requires recognition rather than anticipation. The human mind is conditioned to think in terms of time. It measures progress, imagines outcomes, and projects hope forward. While this way of thinking is useful for practical living, it becomes an obstacle in spiritual awareness. The kingdom does not appear as a future event because it is not an event at all. It is a state of being, and a state of being can only be experienced in the present moment. The moment awareness leaves the present and moves into expectation, the kingdom is overlooked, not because it disappears, but because attention has shifted away from where it can be perceived. This is why spiritual teachings consistently point back to now, not as a philosophical idea, but as a living reality. The present moment is the only place where consciousness exists. It is also the only place where divine presence can be known. To say the kingdom is present is to say that nothing needs to be added to this moment for God to be here. Nothing needs to improve, resolve, or become ideal. The kingdom does not wait for circumstances to align, it is revealed within them, even when they are imperfect or unresolved. When the kingdom is postponed, life becomes divided. There is the life being lived now and the spiritual life imagined for later. This division creates inattention. People try to endure the present in hopes of a future revelation, unaware that endurance itself reinforces separation. The realization that the kingdom is present reunites life and spirituality. Ordinary moments, work, relationships, challenges, silence, become the very ground where divine awareness unfolds. Nothing needs to be escaped because nothing is outside the reach of presence. This understanding also transforms suffering. Pain is no longer interpreted as evidence of spiritual failure or delay. Difficulty does not mean the kingdom is absent. It often becomes the doorway through which deeper awareness emerges. When attention rests in the present instead of resisting it, even discomfort can reveal a quiet stability beneath it. That stability is not created by circumstances, it exists prior to them. It is the underlying presence that remains untouched by change. Recognizing the kingdom as present does not mean denying growth or transformation. Growth still occurs, but it arises from fullness rather than lack. Change flows naturally when life is lived from awareness instead of expectation. The future no longer carries the weight of fulfillment. Hope shifts from anticipation to trust. Instead of waiting for God to arrive, the heart becomes receptive to the realization that God has never been absent. When this realization deepens, time loosens its grip. Anxiety about what should happen fades. Regret about what did not happen loses its power. Attention settles into the quiet simplicity of now, and within this simplicity, the kingdom reveals itself, not as something dramatic or extraordinary, but as a steady, living presence that has always been here, patiently waiting to be recognized rather than awaited. Much of human struggle is rooted in the belief that life must be forced into order through constant effort. People strive to fix, control, and secure outcomes because they fear that without their effort, everything will fall apart. This same pattern often enters spiritual life. Faith becomes another form of labor, and trust is replaced by anxiety disguised as responsibility. People pray with tension, plan with fear, and live with a sense of carrying life on their shoulders. Yet when the kingdom is understood, a profound shift takes place. Struggle begins to give way to rest, not because life becomes effortless, but because the source from which effort arises changes. Rest, in this deeper sense, is not passivity or indifference. It is the release of inner resistance. It is the recognition that life is not sustained by personal effort alone. Beneath all visible activity, there is an unseen intelligence quietly coordinating, guiding, and supporting existence. When this is recognized, the inner burden of trying to manage everything begins to dissolve. Action still happens, decisions are still made, and responsibilities are still honored, but they are no longer driven by fear. They arise from clarity rather than compulsion. Struggle is exhausting because it is rooted in the belief of separation. The individual feels alone, responsible for outcomes that are far beyond human control. This belief creates tension, worry, and constant mental noise. Rest enters when this belief is gently questioned. As awareness shifts, there is a growing sense that life is not hostile or chaotic, but purposeful and ordered at a level deeper than appearances. This does not eliminate challenges, but it changes the way they are met. Instead of reacting from panic, there is space for response. Instead of rushing for solutions, there is patience to allow insight to emerge. When rest replaces struggle, faith becomes experiential rather than conceptual. It is no longer something one tries to practice, it becomes a natural state of being. There is less need to convince oneself that things will be okay. A quiet confidence begins to replace reassurance. This confidence is not optimism about outcomes, but trust in the presence that remains constant regardless of outcomes. From this place, even uncertainty feels less threatening. This inner rest has a noticeable effect on the body and mind. Tension softens, breathing deepens, the nervous system begins to settle. Thoughts slow down. These changes are not the result of techniques or discipline. They occur naturally when the inner pressure of control is released. The body responds to the mind's recognition that it is not alone, that it does not have to remain in constant vigilance. Rest also transforms action. When effort is no longer driven by fear, it becomes more effective. Actions are simpler, more focused, and less scattered. Energy is conserved rather than depleted. There is less need to push because life begins to open in unexpected ways. Opportunities arise without force. Solutions appear without struggle. This is not because effort has disappeared, but because effort is aligned with a deeper current rather than working against it. Living from rest does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging with the world from a place of inner stability. Challenges are still present, but they no longer define one's inner state. Peace becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in awareness. In this way, rest is not an escape from life, but a different way of inhabiting it. One in which trust quietly replaces struggle and life is allowed to unfold with a sense of support rather than strain. Many people approach spiritual life believing that material needs, success, health, or peace must be pursued directly. They focus their energy on acquiring, fixing, and securing these things, often with the fear that if they do not chase them, they will be lost. This mindset creates constant tension because it places effects in the position of causes. When life is lived this way, attention is fixed on outcomes rather than on the source from which outcomes arise. The teaching that all things are added naturally reverses this approach. It